let me introduce myself real quick, get a little background on me, and talk a little bit about what we're going to do today. So, name's John Welder. I'm head of the PMO here at Citrix. Before that, I've done a number of jobs that are related to Agile and kind of give a slightly different twist on it. So, I have an experience where, in the past, where I've ran the Agile deployment at Cisco, much in the past, right? After that, I ran the operations and the software development processes for Ericsson, and then ran into a program where I ran innovation for all of Ericsson. And from there, went into a consultancy where I worked for companies like GE and Kaiser and a bunch of other companies, large like this, trying to drive their innovation programs and help them improve their innovation. And then moved from that to this role. And so Rahul asked me if I had a good workshop from my experiences, and I thought, wow, it'd be really interesting to talk about design thinking, because there's a lot of overlap between design thinking and Agile, and it's interesting to bring this up, give you guys an experience with it, and then see how we can leverage and use those skill sets inside our Agile processes. So this isn't exactly Agile, but there's a lot of corollaries between this and Agile, and let's give you guys an experience, and I want to spend the last 10 minutes when we're done, really now retrospecting and trying to understand where do we see the overlaps and where do we see how we've used these skills to be successful. But I'm a firm believer in learning by doing. I never learn because someone shows it to me and I don't do anything with it. I'd rather do. So we're going to actually practice this here. But let me jump into a simple definition of design thinking. Now, there's lots of more complex definitions, but I like to simplify. So design thinking is an iterative, instructive approach to repeatable innovation. Okay? And it has 3 steps. It starts very basically with getting inspired and understanding not just the needs, but even the unarticulated needs of your customers. Okay? Sorry. Second phase, once you really kind of understand the problem you're trying to innovate against, and you understand your customers and what you're trying to solve for them, you start to come up with ideas on how to resolve that. And there's techniques on how to get to lots of great ideas quickly and refine them down very rapidly into things that you can go prototype. Then the last phase is action, and this is in Agile are very well aligned. Matter of fact, almost all the Agile principles in this are exactly the same. And it's about rapid prototyping, trying to as fast as possible learn, get customer feedback, iterate, do it again, right? And it's very interesting. I find that I have to still push a lot of engineers who've been doing Agile for years to do this better, because they still want to actually code the whole damn thing before they actually get feedback from customers in any way. So, so today we're going to actually practice even some rapid prototyping. So I want to dig in a little bit more and just explain this a little bit more, and then we'll actually do it. So inspiration is really about understanding unmet customer needs. And here's some pictures where, actually, in my experience, I was trying to help other companies improve the inspiration that they needed to solve the problems that they were solving. The first one is very similar to problems that we have at Citrix and probably the other audiences here, which was usability of our products by our customer. And so in this case, literally, this is a screenshot of one of the products that the team I was working with had created, and I made them sit and watch customers use it. Just watch them use it. And what's really interesting is every single time the customer does something that's not within the scope of your tool, it's almost always pointing at some deficiency that you need to go fix or some innovation you can go make. Like, for example, when they look at your tool and they pull out their notebook and they flick to page 3 and they look, oh, okay, 24 means production, and then they type 24. You just found something you need to go fix to make it easier to use, as an example. And they won't tell you, they often, if you ask them, tell me what's wrong, they won't tell you I have to look up 24 at a time. You have to really look for their unarticulated needs. You have to look for when they were suffering, they were having problems, and they often don't say it very well. I'll give another quick story here. Working with some customers on, without naming the name of the company, but they made stuff to help you wash clothes, okay? And so it's really funny. You go and you sit down and you talk with women and men who sit at home and do laundry all the time, right? And they have this vision of themselves of being, excuse the language, but super mom. yeah, I can do 20 loads of laundry a day. I've got the system. I can go bang, bang, bang. I can get through. And they talk about themselves as if they can do all this stuff. But when you actually watch them do it, they do 3 loads. And they get tired and they're frustrated. And you watch all the actions that they do. And the way they describe themselves in their euphoric and trying to promote themselves mind isn't actually what they do. And if you don't watch them, you wouldn't know. You just talk to them, you don't learn. And so inspiration quite often is about interacting with those end users and watching them and understanding them. Even them telling you or filling out a survey isn't enough. You have to take it to the next level and really experience their experience before you're inspired and understand their needs. So once you're in the shoes of this customer and understanding their needs, and you have a team, a small team of smart people you're working with to do this, now you want to try to ideate rapidly on ways to innovate whatever it is you're working on. And there's techniques on this. We're going to go through a brainstorm today, and there's rules on brainstorming, and the rules are going to surprise some of you guys. The rules are fun. But brainstorming well is a technique that if you follow the right structure, you can actually get a lot of really good brainstorming done rapidly. If you follow the wrong structure, it's just divergent and everyone leaves the room unhappy. So we're going to talk about how to do this well. But the real goal is to come up with lots and lots and lots. With the room of the smart people here, with the idea that we're going to work on today, we could probably come up with 500 ideas in 20 minutes, no problem, right? Not hard. And then the trick is, after you have those 500 ideas, then you refine. And that's a really interesting model, but a lot of people try to refine on the fly, and that causes a lot of issues. It's much better to get it all out there and then go through a refinement process. And you tend to get much better ideas when you do that. We'll experience it. And finally, once you have an idea, it's just an idea. It's only an idea. You don't know if it's real until you actually prototype it, and you test it, and you get feedback, and you go. And the faster that you can experiment and get direct feedback and course correct, the faster you'll get to a valid product that will be innovative and make you lots of money, right? Period. And this is where almost everyone can improve their skill set because they're very afraid of, they want to use their natural programming skills or other things, especially engineers, to do this. And there's such easier ways that are so much faster. And so try to step out of the box that you've created for yourself on how you do this and try to do it in much simpler ways. And we'll practice it a little bit today. Okay, so that's the quick summary. It's pretty simple, but you'll understand a lot more if we go through it. So we're going to actually do a design thinking workshop. And the agenda is we're going to do some inspiration, we're going to do some ideation, some action, and I'm going to change this a little bit. We're big enough here. I wasn't expecting quite this many people. So we're big enough here that instead of interviewing at your table, we'll actually interview some people here up front, and we'll all commonly share that. It'll be easier to manage. Sorry, I went too far. So here's the challenge. And I picked this one because I've used it a few times, and almost everyone has an opinion on this, and it's kind of fun, right? So the challenge is, let's pretend that we all work for Tesla, okay, and Elon Musk. And it's fun. We have a blank sheet. We don't have any preconceived ideas. How can we create a better experience for people in a car? Now, let's be clear. This doesn't say how to create a better car. This says, how do we create a better experience for people in a car? Okay? I want you guys to think about that for a sec. And this is just an example of this workshop running in Stanford, and they have some great tools where they have all these foam and stuff, so they can actually do some lo-fi prototyping right there with just seats and foam core. I mean, just give you an idea, you can do a lot without actually having to do that much. Okay, so what we're going to do here is I'm actually going to pick someone in the room here to interview. I'll do it once. And then we have enough time, we might pick one more person to interview. So instead of me doing it inside your groups, we'll do it up front because it'll be too hard to manage with this many people. But there's some rules here. We're going to pick somebody. The rest of you are taking notes, okay? And what you hear, what you get impressed by, the things that are important that you hear out of this interview, and you're doing it on Post-its. And it's really important that we do it on Post-its for a couple reasons. Let me steal some here. Post-its have a huge value when you're trying to do innovation. First of all, if I write an idea and I don't like it, who cares? It costs nothing, right? The amount of effort to do a Post-it and to write down my idea, as compared to I can ask you to write down a PRD and you have to spend 2 hours writing it up, now you're invested, right? I don't want you invested inside this right now. I just want you to get your ideas down. But Post-its also, there's a lot of great things to do. They can be colored. I could have given every single one in the room here a different color Post-it, and then we could track who said what, right? I can arrange Post-its. I could have them originally set up by who, by, say, the subject matter. Say that we talked to 10 people, and I have a list of Post-its for all 10 people. But now I want to reorganize it by who was interested inside subject A. I don't want to preconceive ideas for you, but let's say subject A. And so then we reorganize all the Post-its to show who was interested in A and B and what they said, and now suddenly I start to see some insights that are consistent across everybody, right? Post-its are very portable. You can destroy them and throw them away. They're not necessarily green, so that's the one thing I wish they were, is green. I haven't figured out a green solution yet. But when it comes to innovation, they're very powerful. So learn to use Post-its. You'd be surprised how much you can do. There are good Post-its and bad Post-its. This is a great Post-it. It's got one thought and it's easy to read, right? It's a bad Post-it. It's got like 4 thoughts on it, and I can't even read it here, let alone you guys back there, right? So your thoughts should be concise, simple, and the reason why you all have big black Sharpie markers is because it's so much easier to read big black Sharpie marker than it is ballpoint pen. So please use your big black Sharpie markers. Move that back. Okay. As we're interviewing, you're trying to take notes on Post-its. And if I was doing this in real life, in a real situation, it's usually one interviewer and one note taker and someone you're interviewing. Okay? It's really, really, really hard to take good notes by yourself. Right? Very hard to be engaged, be empathetic, understand the needs of the person you're talking to, ask good questions, and take notes. There's a workaround, which is record sessions, but there are some people who don't like to be recorded. There are some legal situations where it's not okay. And when the interviewee knows that you're recording, they will sometimes change the responses significantly. So you want to try to get your interviewee into a comfortable zone. We're going to talk about that in a sec here. So some tips with interviewing. Always have an open mind. It's really, engineers are the worst at this. Engineers will conclude, oh, you mean this, really fast, because that's how they're wired and they're trained to be conclusion-driven all the time, right? So engineers stand back and just open mind and try to understand their point of view and don't try to impose what you think they're saying. Just try to understand what you're hearing, right? Empathize. Try to understand their point of view, right? It'd be a really interesting experiment to do this with someone who's completely schizophrenic, because you could probably learn a lot if you could get into their mind and their shoes, and it's hard because they're all over the place. But you really want to try to emphasize and understand their point of view. Open-ended questions are your friend here. Okay, so who knows what open-ended versus non-open-ended is? Yeah, an example? Okay, what's a closed-ended question?
What's your favorite color?
Yeah. What's an open-ended question?
How do you feel
Good.
today? How are you feeling? How are you feeling?
Yes. And if you want to get into color,
I guess that could be either.
yeah. If you want to get into color, you could say, tell me which color you like to wear today. And why? Why are you wearing that color? I don't understand.
What do you think of this room?
What do you think of this room? And so, really, the worst questions are the leading questions, like, why, I'm a trial lawyer, so why did you try to kill that boy on the bike? Why did you try to kill him, right? Objective, leading question, right? Leading questions are the worst, because you're trying to imply the answer inside the question, and sometimes you do it, but you'll always get a non-good answer for understanding the unmet needs when you ask closed questions. Open questions are always better. And the other thing that's really interesting about this is it's a really good management technique. All good people managers learn how to ask open questions because they're trying to understand what's happening with employees. So practicing this is good for all careers. But it is good to ask why. Why? And I'll give an example of this. I was looking for this job. People ask me, John, why do you like this job? Well, I like working with people. Well, why do you like working with people? I'm thinking about it. Well, because I really like it when I'm helping them and I see them do something more successful. Well, why do you like that? It's interesting. I guess I feel reward. It's almost like when you help your son or daughter do something and then suddenly they could do something they couldn't do before and how you feel like as a parent. I feel that when I help other people. There's the nugget. That's the truth. But you have to why it like 5 times before you actually get to the real truth. And so quite often you have to work things down to get to the real hidden nuggets. The first answer, quite often the person you're interviewing hasn't thought it rationally all the way down. And so you have to help them work their way down to what's really the root of the problem. So why is really an important question. But finally, you'll hear this all the time, listen. Right? It's really interesting how well comfortable pauses work. You know, if you go back to the question, tell me, how do you feel about the color in this room? Wait. And let them think. And it will start to flow, and they'll, if you start to push them, they'll pick the first thing that comes, and they won't think it through, and you'll get a bad answer. So listen carefully. Pauses are your friend. Don't try to force the conversation. These are all skills that help with interviewing. Okay, so let's do this. I'm going to pick some of the audience. I'm looking for someone in the audience here who's passionate about the car they drive. They love driving their cars. Tell me a little bit why you love driving your car.
I just bought an electric car.
An electric
Really
car.
good.
Okay. I'm not done yet. Who has a long commute in the room? Who has an awful commute?
It's over here.
Okay. I might turn this around, you guys. When I'm in the Bay Area, I have a killer commute. It sucks. So, who has a huge family that they pull around in the car?
We'd be there with them right now.
Anyone have a big family? Anyone has experience? Okay. I'm gonna pick on you first then. Okay. So here's what we're gonna do. This is it's a little bit contrived because it'd be so much better if it wasn't an audience and it was just a small setting. You're probably much more likely to open up. But
I don't know about that.
but I'm also judging on your reaction was very positive. You're very open. You're very ready to go. So it seems like you'd be good. So we're gonna do this. I'm gonna actually interview them. I'll do it in the front of the room. This would be better if we didn't have so many people. I had you guys do it inside your group, so it's hard to manage with this many people. So I'm going to interview. I want you guys to take notes, and then we'll kind of sit back after we're done and look at what we heard. Okay? And so come on up.
You want us to take notes on Post-its?
Take notes on Post-its. 1 note per Post-it, right? What we're going to do when we're done here is we're going to in each table, we're going to kind of go through what we heard within the tables, and we're going to put the notes together and kind of come up with clusters of what we heard, right? And come up with problem statements based upon the problems that we identified with what we heard. So we want everyone to have individual notes, and we're going to go through and review those and cluster when we're done. Okay. Hi, Nels. I'm John.
Hi. How are you?
Nice to meet you.
You too.
So we're running a project where we really want to make a great car with a great user experience, right? And so I just would love to interview you and get your point of view on some questions. There's no right or wrong answers. There's no ill intent to you. There's nothing bad that happens to you out of this. You can share as much as you like. Your name won't be associated with we're done. But I'm going to take the data and it's going to be combined with other interviews. And we're going to use it to try to understand the needs of our customers to go forward. Okay? You feel comfortable?
Yeah.
Okay, very good. And so, first of all, just tell me, what's your name and what do you do? Who's Nels?
My name's Nels. I work right here at Citrix
Okay,
in the marketing department.
very good, very good.
And, yeah, and I have a family, a 9-year-old wife. We live in Nolita.
Very good. So what cars does your family own? I'm wondering.
We own a Chevy Volt and a Spark.
Okay, interesting. That's 2 electric cars. So is there, I'd like to understand, why do you feel the need for electric cars?
Got tired of paying a lot of money gas.
So
Right.
is there a business case you've kind of done for yourself here that helps you understand why this is better? Help me walk through that decision.
So the decision was, there was a whole bunch of reasons. I was paying like $175 a month for my VW Eurovan.
Okay.
Love the van, it was a lot of fun, but it's gotten ridiculous and I don't commit to the environment.
Okay.
And this lease program came out with Chevy where they were like, it's $130 a month. I went in and I'm like, okay, I know the state of California has a $2,500 rebate, and I know the federal government has a $7,500 rebate. But this might be a really good deal. And so I went in, drove it, liked it, and even with like some extras in there, it was a cheap lease, and it's practically free in the end by the time you get through it.
Okay.
And then my wife liked driving the electric car so much, she
Interesting. So let's dig into it a little bit. When you were inside the old VW, and now you're inside your electric car,
yeah.
tell me what's different.
Well, like in the van, there's value in both ways, I see, right? Like there's nice things about both.
Okay.
But in the van, it was high up, and I had all this room in the back. It's a ton, right? It's a very big car, big van. It was loud, especially compared. I can hardly get into an internal combustion car because it seems so loud
Okay.
compared to an electric car. It was in some ways more comfortable to have a van. It had a table in the back. It had a pull-out bed, lots of cargo space, and yet with the electric car, it's plenty comfortable. I can park anywhere. I can, I get really good parking spaces when I need to charge downtown because you've got the first parking spaces that you can plug in and charge up.
Okay. Let me ask another question. Tell me about the best experience you've had so far where you really felt good when you're inside your new car.
There have been a couple, but I'd say one of the best experiences is that in a smaller car, you're kind of like wondering whether it has enough power or whether whether it's comfortable enough. And I think there was a time when I was coming off the turnpike ramp and a big truck was coming, and I'm like, okay, I put on the sport mode and I jammed, and I was able to get past him no problem, because it's like 0 to 60 in 5.8.
Okay, very good.
So it's pretty speedy when you need it.
Yeah, very good.
And that was a good feeling because it didn't take much. It was still quiet and able to come back down. I don't want to do that too much because it'll it'll delay your battery life pretty much.
Okay.
I start thinking in terms of there's a major mindset change of how long your battery's going to last and when you have to charge it.
Okay. Have you ever run into an issue where the charging became a problem?
No.
Okay.
Luckily, there's a fast charger down at Costco.
Okay.
It's really simple to do.
That's interesting. Tell me a little more about that. What does that mean, the fast charging on the system?
It only takes like half an hour.
Half an hour.
You wait. Well, I use a smartphone app where you do the QR code on the unit,
Yeah.
and then you just press start charging. You put it in.
Yeah.
And it's sponsored by Deckers and the city of Toledo, so it's free right now.
Very good. Does the app tell you when it's done too?
It does.
Okay.
It's really nice.
Very cool. What's the worst experience you've had so far inside the time when you really were either stressed or angry or uncomfortable or unhappy?
I haven't been stressed, angry, or uncomfortable or unhappy. I'd say the only thing is just like, oh, I can't fit that in my car. We better take my wife's car. Or I can't go to LA in the car.
Okay.
Right. So one of the reasons why we bought the Volt is that we can still with gas because it's half gas.
Yeah.
Still go to LA.
Okay. Very interesting. Okay. I'm going to pause. Very good. Thank you very much. In order for time, we could keep going, and that was juicy. We could probably go for another half an hour and get really good stuff, right? Go into what's the difference between his wife's car and his car, You could dove into, tell me about the best experiences you had in the VW and the bad experiences you had in the VW. I mean, that was juicy. There's lots of stuff we could go on there. But you saw there was some really good stuff there, and he started to get into the things that made a difference for him. Who wants to share something that made a difference? Some unmet need or some need that you learned based upon
30-minute charging was considered very fast.
30 minutes charging was fast. Good. What else? Who wants to learn something?
Parking spaces were easier to find and
Parking
plentiful.
spaces are fine. Parking spaces are important.
0 to 60 and 5.8.
5.8.
He was ready to start thinking in terms of the car's welfare, completely different. He internalized the model of the car and was ready to make an effort to adapt to what the new car required, the new paradigm.
This is really good. So it says that there's something more than just that electric car experience and the size. There's something about, for him, there's something about the economic value of that. And it's probably not just cash, because 30-minute charging at the amount of money that you make is going to be way greater in cost than, if you actually do the math analysis, the opportunity cost is going to be very high. And so
Yeah, it depends on what I'm doing during that time.
maybe it's what you're doing time,
Yeah.
but you have to modify your life to make it all happen. But still, for some reason, that value is strong for you.
Yeah.
And I don't know if we got to that. That would be really interesting. If you could really nail that, understanding that unmet need, that would be huge.
Noise.
Noise was a big issue. Okay, so here's what I want you guys to do at your tables. I want you to go through each table, maybe clear the top of the tables off. I see there's pizza and stuff. And try to cluster what you've heard together. Probably the best way to do it is have one person kind of read out and say what they did, and then other people cluster on top of that as they go through it. Okay? So pick one person on the table to start, and then read off what they did, and then you cluster in the things that are similar to what you've heard. And try to cluster them together visually so you can see them. Okay, we're getting pretty close here. Let me get everyone's attention again. So imagine now that you've done this with 10, 20 people, and if it was this particular thing, we probably went into some categories. We tried to look for someone that does a long commute. We tried to look for someone that's got a family. It's very interesting when you do this for this particular exercise and you do a women gender focus, you always hear about how hard it is to put your handbag in the car. Every time. Every time. And so, women, there's no, you can't put a glove compartment, you can't put it next to you, and the bag, and so designing for the bag becomes a huge advantage every time. It's interesting.
Or even a messenger bag,
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
You don't know where to put it.
Yes. And so you want to think about your potential users, and you want to try to think about, when you're doing this, you really want to look for edges. Okay? And so I'll give an example of this. If I wanted to design a new pencil, I just don't go talk to everyone using pencils. I go and talk to professors who have to write a whole bunch every single day, or maybe even the guy that does the Bible scribing, copying stuff for the Vatican. And I go and understand what his needs are. And I go to a 3-year-old kid that's just learning how to write and understand what his needs are. And you usually find the needs at the edges, not in the center. Okay? So you often look at edges. Okay? And so that's just one feedback that I've learned over time. And imagine now that we've done this for 20 kind of diverse people who are the edges of this space. Again, maybe someone that does large commutes, maybe someone that has a big family, someone that does all their business out of the car. You identify a suite of folks, and you go through this, and you've created these. What I like to use is those big foam cord boards, and I'll usually fill out. I'll call it Bob, and I'll put everything I heard about Bob on the board in clusters, right? And then I've got 10 boards here of all the different people I spoke to, and then we start to rearrange between boards to make new understandings that go across our customer set. And really important things will pop, right? With this group, I bet you will find that gas savings, cost savings for gas, environmentalism, there's something about the unique experience of an electric car where it's quiet. That experience will come out of this group. And so you'll start, but when you do it across the theme, you'll start to come up with some insights that are common across everybody. And the insights are really key. Those are really where these unmet needs usually are. And if you can identify common insights, now you can start to come up with, okay, how do I fix the issues that those insights are bringing up? Okay? Question?
How might you go about discovering that there are two different cars that need to be built, not one?
Yeah, so that might be something that comes out of this. Usually when you're doing a big project, if we're doing this as a big project, what you'd identify inside the first phase is what I call opportunity areas. Okay? I'll give an example. I was doing a project like this for Ericsson. Okay? And we were digging into the whole, in the high-tech world, the routing, switching, networking world, everything is virtualizing like what happened with computers. Okay? And so in the past, everything was cold hardware. Now, there isn't such thing as a single standalone computer. They're all virtualized, running in cloud, and you're grabbing memory and hard drive and CPUs you need, and it's a virtual machine, right? Same thing's gonna happen with routers and switches. So as you start to go through that, you know that change is coming down, you start to think about what are the, you go through a cycle like this, trying to understand what should we be doing. You come up not with answers of products, you come up with opportunity areas you're gonna invest more, okay? And so cloud stack, go understand cloud stack more, and let's go dig inside there. How do you, if you were to take one very specific point, if you separate memory from CPUs directly, not hard drive, but memory from CPUs, how does that change the networking system? That becomes a huge, interesting thing that's going to happen in the next 5 years, because memory has to be really close to CPUs because of bus speeds. But when you put fiber optics into the hardware, and you can now move, you can have the memory be on a different floor and CPUs on a different floor and mount them independently. That completely changes the whole environment. The coding, everything changes. And so that's another opportunity area that you would dig into. So we came up with like 5 or 6 of these opportunity areas, we prioritize them, and then we start the process again within that area, right? So big complex problems, like anything else, it's almost, if I use an Agile analogy, right, you start out with the big goals, you create epics, then you create scrums, right? It's the same model. You look at the big area, you break it into smaller areas, put it on epics, and you break those down into areas you can go execute and create products and create experiments in, and you start executing, right? So the model looks very similar. Good answer, good question. Other questions? Okay, so what I want to get to now is I want you guys to look at your areas and try to find within each team one area that becomes very interesting for you guys to try to come up with how can we fix this? How might we fix this? So we came up with some how might we fix it. What I went through is I went through each different table and helped them identify a space where they could innovate based upon what they heard. Okay? So what we tend to do when we're doing these innovation design thinking is we'll usually pick 5 or 6 or 7 areas that came up over and over again, and we'll do 3 or 4 brainstorms with different people inside each space, okay? In each area that we want to work on. The process is we create this thing called we really want to generate questions that we're going to try to answer in the brainstorm, and we usually call them how might we questions, okay? How might we is really interesting. How might we is a really open question that allows you to think of lots of different ways to solve a problem. And so I didn't make this up. This comes straight from IDEO, which is probably the leaders in design thinking in the world. And they've basically standardized on how might we, and it seems to work all the time. Okay? So for example, I have one here, how might we imagine a car that makes it more pleasurable to travel on long trips? But what you want to do is how might we, based upon the experience that you had and the insights that you gained inside the interview process. And so each table's picked an area. You guys remind me your how might we question?
Battery.
Okay.
How might we make the battery?
Make it a more enjoyable experience around the battery.
Okay. So it's really the issue that they're trying to solve is it's not just a bigger battery, but the battery causes shortness in time and driving and other things. So how might they improve the experience of the car with a shorter battery life, right? So not necessarily improving the battery, but there's lots of other things you can do to try to fix this, right?
Mm-hmm.
Okay? So trying to help narrow it down there. Go ahead.
We had pretty much the same thing.
Okay?
How might we improve the experience of the car because of the short battery life?
Okay. So I might have got the two confused when I helped you out there. Okay. So again, that's good. It'll be interesting to see what answers you guys come up with that are going to be the same or different when we go through the brainstorming. What did you guys come up with?
We talk more in terms of range than battery life.
Okay.
So it might raise a different question of how can
Okay.
we make sure that folks are having a great experience despite other than range.
Very good. And you guys had a very interesting question. Why don't you
Yeah,
repeat
we
yours?
had, how might we improve the economic and environmental aspects of the vehicle without compromising the capacity and utility of the vehicle?
Right. So very good. Now, again, if we were Elon Musk's team, we probably would come up with this battery problem. We'd probably come up with 5 or 6 different ways to brainstorm on this issue, just this issue. And you would have different parties and brainstorm through. And that's really valuable because when you get to the end, if you start to see a consistent repeating pattern on the answers, you start to really realize the common area to go chase after. But let's go into some brainstorm. So I want you guys now to use these as your how might we question, and we're going to actually try to brainstorm some answers. And we're going to probably use even more post-its than we did before. But there's rules on brainstorming. Let me walk through these. Do I have them all worked out? No. Okay. I have actually some fun slides that go one at a time, but we'll go through the whole list at once. The first and most important part about brainstorming is you're not judging now. You don't say that won't work because of this reason. This is not the time to judge. The most critical version of this I saw was at San Jose State. I got asked to come into San Jose State to the business department and help them negotiate their budget. Okay? So you guys remember, this is like 4 years ago. You remember how bad it was. The state cut everything. The school had no money, and you got all these PhDs that all are trying to run their programs. And usually what happens inside that space is excuse the language, but the biggest, loudest asshole wins. You can't do that because you're just so stupid. It's got to be like this. You've all been inside that meeting where someone shuts the whole thing down because he's very dominant and strong, or she's very dominant and strong, and it doesn't go anywhere. It's singularly focused on the opinion of the one guy. The rules here are really to try to stop that. I want everyone to participate. I want everyone to be creative. I want everyone to have a voice. Okay? So we are trying not to have that behavior. We want to do the opposite behavior. We want to be inclusive. We want to build upon each other. We want to really pull the best out and share. Okay? That's the rules here. But they're specific. Deferred judgment. We'll judge later. We'll decide what works and doesn't work later. Sometimes crazy ideas that you know won't work actually inspire someone to think of something that does. Right? So deferred judgment. But it is okay to build. Wow, that idea about rechargeable batteries are interesting. What if it's also rechargeable and a removable battery? What if I could have like 4 batteries and I leave one at work that's charged? And when I get into work, I just actually swap the battery and now I double my range. That is building upon each other, and that's okay. And that's a good behavior. That's a really good behavior. Sometimes crazy ideas inspire real ideas. Okay? And so I'm doing a microwave equipment. Microwave equipment transmits over these long radio waves, internet capacity, right? And the big issue was that when one side goes down, you don't know if it was this side or that side. So how can I build a new microwave equipment that allows me to identify the route? Is it left or right, right? And so this one guy says, well, why don't we go buy some of those US droid planes, and we put a receiver on it, we fly it to the front of the thing, and we test. And, okay, that might technically work, but it's really expensive, right? So most people are automatically saying, oh, that can't work. But one guy says, God, that's a really crazy idea, but could we do it with like a helicopter drone? And another guy goes, well, gosh, what if we need a drone? Why can't we just build the robot right in the tower and have the robot switch down in front and then test, and if it's this side, you'll know right away. And so one guy had a crazy idea, and it probably wasn't possible, but inspired another guy to get to the right answer. Okay? So crazy ideas are really good. And being outrageous is actually helpful inside these experiments. But be generous. This is something I have to say in Silicon Valley. Silicon Valley guys are taught, and gals, are taught to not share their idea. It's a really good idea, and I'm not going to share it. They're taught this from the time they get out of high school because everyone's stealing ideas. This is not the place for that. This is the place to share. But stay focused. We're talking about whatever your topic is, not what's great coffee, not what food I'd like to eat, not who I'd like to date, none of that. We're talking about whatever your how might we question is. One conversation. The way this works is someone says, I have an idea, what if we did this? And you let that person state their thing, share their idea, and then go to the next. Right? And if I have to come in and arbitrate because people are talking over, I will. But you guys are all pretty mature. I'm hoping you'll give each other time to complete your sentences, right? Visual is better than written. It's much easier to draw a picture of a removable battery than it is to actually write removable battery. They'll usually get it faster with a picture. So if you can do a picture, use a picture, it conveys more. And then right now we're going for lots. You guys are all smart. In 10 minutes, each one of you could produce 20 ideas. Okay? Which means that we have, what, we have 18 people. We could probably produce 400 ideas. Right? So, that's our plan. Let's go. Finally, let's select one facilitator in each group. The facilitator is asking for, tell me what your idea is and taking it on. The facilitator can also offer ideas, but the first primary result is to gather everyone else's and keep the conversation going. And the same rules on Post-its. Don't make them unlegible. Make them easy to understand. Right? Yep.
So, I'm slower than everybody else here. But I thought, so we've already got, when we picked the battery life, how do we make it work?
Yeah.
I thought we brainstormed. So we,
No, now what you did was you just came up with what you heard in your inspiration and what the issues are. And you've identified an issue. Now you're going to try to come up with fixes. And we're going to go through a whole brainstorming session of fixes. You might have started that when I was walking around, but that wasn't the goal. I just wanted you guys to focus on what your topic's going to be.
okay.
Okay? So, so I want you guys to focus on that topic now and start to come up with ideas. But follow these rules that we just went through, right?
Yeah.
Follow these rules. Okay? Are we ready? Who's going to facilitate? Everyone raise a, who's going to facilitate? I want a facilitator on this table. Marcia, are you going to facilitate?
I'll do it.
Okay, you're facilitating. Who's going to facilitate here? Good. Who's going to facilitate here? Who's the facilitator? Okay. Who's the facilitator? Okay. Ready, set, go. So you guys, why don't you describe the idea that you guys like the most? Why don't you describe what it is that you thought you liked? To everybody else in the room here. So everyone pay attention. They're going to describe what their idea is.
So our idea is kind of a modular vehicle. So in different times of the day, you might not need so much space, so you can jump into kind of a small, smart car that's just one passenger. And then later in the day, you want to go to the beach with your family, so you need a lot of stuff in your car. So it kind of expands. It has a big bay in the back, and you can put all your stuff in, and then you can drive to the beach. And then the next day for work, it kind of transforms and becomes a smaller vehicle. So it's kind of like a vehicle that transforms shapes
Okay. Very good.
to fit to your needs.
Love it. I'll come back to you guys since you're last time 15. What idea do you guys like the most?
Some sort of remote charging, so through wireless or magnets or anything like that, where you're being charged from somewhere else while you're driving.
So endless charge. You never run out of charge because it's always available.
Yeah.
Very cool. What do you guys have?
Our actual favorite as well was some sort of inductive charge in the roadways.
Okay. Awesome. So you guys both came up with very similar type of things. That's
Came
cool.
up with ours first.
Very good.
They heard it.
So we're missing that 15. Do you want to share? Yeah.
So again, we asked a slightly different question, how can we improve the experience of a limited range?
Yeah.
So we're assuming we have limited range. We didn't spend as much time about how to improve the battery and everything like that.
Yeah.
So our favorite one was a green community where we're encouraging people not to go farther than the range. So Tesla could build a whole community, planned community with office buildings and everything else, but
Yeah.
they wouldn't need to go.
Very good. So planned community to try to reduce the need for cars.
Yeah, focusing on the green aspect.
Awesome. Okay, so what I would usually do now inside a real project is I'd pick, after we've done this several times, so we've done like 5 or 6 brainstorms, and we've actually consolidated a second time and decide what was really the top, right? And then we would go through and come up with, how can we rapidly prototype and test? These are just ideas. They don't really work yet until you've actually gotten some customer feedback and you start to iterate towards a solution. So how could we go rapidly test these ideas? And I always try to challenge people in the fastest, lowest cost way. So the test always starts off with some kind of hypothesis, and you use a hypothesis to try to and some kind of rapid prototype to test the hypothesis with real users. That's usually the method. Let me talk about an example. So you guys all have an action worksheet here, which is a simple way to come up with your test. And it's just a tool. You'll see that design thinking sometimes like to use what they call design to think tools. Okay? And so I like to use worksheets a lot because worksheets are a great way to get people focused on thinking on a specific task in a way that allows you to be structured and get there quickly. So this worksheet's really designed to think, but it's just really, it's nothing more than you would do other than to design an experiment, but it allows you to think about it in a structured way and get to an experiment very quickly. Let me get an example. So this is very interesting because it's very well related to what we talked about here. So in one of the brainstorms we did on the subject, one of the things that came up a lot was electric cars being too quiet. And that was what the users were saying. And the idea that came up was, how can we make the electric cars make noises so they're safer and easier to understand? It's easier to know that they're coming and whatnot, right? So how can I make them less quiet, but make it a more enjoyable experience, and actually make it something that's fun and interesting and completely different? And so we came up with this idea called Millennium Falcon. And the idea is make your electric car sound like the Millennium Falcon from Star Wars. And more enjoyable for you as the driver, and the pedestrians more alert to the approach to the electric car. So now, how do we create a rapid experiment out of it? Right? First of all, what's the value? The value is allow electric car to make the unique personalized sound to help improve safety and enjoy the vehicle. But the real meat is here on the, I guess it doesn't work, on the, how do you do it? How do you quickly test this? Well, we thought about it for a little bit and we realized, God, it'd be pretty easy to download the sound of the Millennium Falcon onto a Wave on my iPhone, and it'd be pretty easy to strap a big speaker on the top of a Prius. And if the Prius is driving around inside a parking lot like at a big mall, the engine doesn't kick on, so it'd be pretty quiet. So we could test it there. So that's what we did. We threw a speaker on top of it, and we drove around inside a big mall up inside San Jose in the parking lot making Millennium Falcon noises. Stuff like this, right? It was fun. And while we're driving around, one person's driving, one person's controlling the back seat, the sound effects, and another person is taking notes on what everyone else is doing around. And they're even sometimes taking pictures, and as they drive up to someone that's on the street and is making the noises, they took pictures of the visual reaction of the guy. And they did this for a couple hours, and they learned a lot, right? Some people really enjoyed. It was fun. They're excited. Definitely the safety improved, because they all heard the car coming. Some people really enjoyed some of the sounds, right? That kind of high humming sound, that kind of sound people liked, but the laser gun shooting they didn't like. And so, and you could see that reaction. And they recorded all this, and nowadays it's really interesting. We did this. This thing happened about 3 years ago. You can now buy sound skins for your Tesla. They're sound skins. That's what they call them. And you download them to your car, and it makes your car, you can make it sound like a Corvette with a big heavy engine. You can make it sound like a Harley. You can do all kinds of stuff. And so, yeah. So it's really funny, but you can see how this experiment could directly lead towards a product. And furthermore, just this experiment gives you a really clear idea. When I did these 8 different prototypes on these different ideas, I can really quickly make a decision. This one seems to be working. Let's go that direction, and do the next level of prototype, right? And so the whole idea here is to do really rapid prototype, really rapid customer feedback, and try to understand what's real. And I will push everyone to do it at the lowest possible cost. There's always a cheaper way. There's always some way that's faster and cheaper if you just put your mind to it. Okay? So we don't know. I don't know if we want to go. We're kind of out of time. We only have 6 minutes left. What I would like to do if we had more time is come up with some experiments for each of your ideas. But we're kind of out. But you guys get the idea, right? Okay. And so let's kind of jump to retrospective. By the way, this is this is what we went through. Inspiration. We talked to Niels. That's right. We talked to Niels and understood his experience. And you guys all took notes. And you really kind of understood his situation. Maybe not be your situation, but you understood his situation. And then you use that to come up with ideas about the issues that popped out of that interview. And if we had an old time, we'd come up with some rapid experiments like what I just showed to test the ideas that we came up with, right? And so And I'll give an example. Like on your guys' idea, you probably could put a trailer hitch on the back of a car and see how portable that was and how easy it was to take around and modify it slightly so you could put storage or other things like there and test it. And you could take their idea and you could put that trailer hitch to have a battery inside of it that gets charged, that brake stops, something like that, and test their idea if you combine the two, right? So there's lots of ways to rapidly prototype and test these ideas. Another way, though, is simply ask. Draw a couple pictures of what you think it looks like and go to guys and say, what do you think of this? Would you use it? Tell me what it makes you think about. And just the drawing and getting them to think about it and giving you a response will teach you a whole bunch, right? And so, so you can always come up with a very simple prototype and get really fast feedback and make course corrections very quickly, usually without very little effort. Okay, but let's open up to two things. I want to take any questions. So what questions do you guys have? And then I want to ask a question about tying this to Agile, but let's get to that last. What questions do you have?
Do you normally ask more questions about what problems he has, right? Like you ask him a lot of questions about what do you enjoy, and very few questions about what are your pain points and.
I try to find the edges, so I do usually ask, tell me about the great experience you have, and then I ask them to turn it into a story. Just don't tell me the great experience, but tell me the story of the great experience. And then I usually flip it and say, so I'm looking for the edges, tell me the worst experience. What's the worst thing to have? And I did ask that, but he didn't have very many bad things to talk about. So the truth matter is I probably need to probe a little bit more, because he's probably still in the afterglow of a new car. And so, right, when you first have a new girlfriend, everything's wonderful. It's only after 10 years of marriage that things aren't working out so well, right? And so the new car afterglow might not be the right time to ask him those negative questions. And maybe I need to go to a guy who's owned a Volt for 3 years and ask him what the problems that he's facing, right? And so yeah, you have to consider that when you ask that. And that's why it's not like market research where you ask hundreds and thousands of people questions to try to get it. You ask 10 or 20. And you can usually get to all the data you need in 10 or 20 people. But you do need to pick those people so that you're getting edges. If they're all the same person with the same complexity, you don't get anything interesting.
And is ideation harder for positive experiences? Because you're trying to just replicate an existing experience instead of solving an issue.
Ideation sometimes can be hard because sometimes the ideas you're trying to ideate into are complex. And so there are things you can do to help that. If what's happened is the people you're ideating with have gone along this whole journey with you, they've gone through all the interviews, they've had all, they've been inside the shoes of the people we're talking to, they'll probably ideate pretty well. If I take Joe Blow off the street that hasn't been inspired, and I ask them to ideate, they probably won't do as well. But there's tricks on this when we're, again, developing if I was going to do this for a big project, I usually have multiple teams that are out doing the same thing. 3 teams of 2 people interviewing, and they bring it back. And when they come back, I have them first do a readout where they read out, this is what I heard, and they build usually a board of the post-its of what they heard from the person. And then when we get into the ideation session, it's usually like an all-day session. And we'll start out in the morning, and we'll go through all the boards again, and we'll put ourselves in the shoes as much as possible of all these people. And the new people who are going to come brainstorm with us, we'll have them go through those experiences and learn them, right? And so we'll try to engulf them into the inspiration and then jump into the ideation, if I can, right? And so, but you're touching on a key point there. The ideation is valuable. There's 2 kinds of people, the ones who understand the whole thing and then the really crazy thinkers. Crazy thinkers who think out of the box will allow the people who've had the experience come up with a real solution, or a new solution, innovative solution. And so you always want to pull in 2 or 3 people that are just crazy out of the box thinkers inside your brainstorming sessions because they really help, right? So that's a good question.
Love the process, especially getting to the prototype. Any tips on if that turns into a complex solution that may take months or years to actually implement, how to keep the entire team focused on the solution that was prototyped a year ago?
Yeah, so when I was at Ericsson, the way I set this up is I'd have a small team, including myself, of kind of experts that understood this method. And I'd pull in, 3 or 4 people from the development team with me and make them go through a round of this process. and then they take that back to the rest of the development team, and they kind of own drive the development team through, right? And so, and for two reasons. One, I want to get them to experience it once and build the skill sets and kind of lead by example with the other teams. But it also allows them to be embedded with that product development and be that kind of that advocate as it goes forward. There's still a lot of tricks here. I mean, it's important. What will probably happen if I were to do that here right now is I'd inspire them, they'd understand better, and for the first 3 months they'd be on a completely different track, but then they'd fall back into their old behaviors. And the trick is to get them back in front of the customers. Get them to test directly with the customers, get the customer feedback loop going. And when you get that customer feedback loop going, just like with Agile, then this runs really well. If that customer feedback loop is opaque and secondhand, and you're talking to your marketing guy, and it's not direct, then the value of it starts to degrade over time, and it starts to look like Agile degraded as well. It starts to look very similar. And so, in the end, that customer feedback loop is just so critical. Very important. The people who can do that well will always out-execute the people who don't. Right? Does that answer the question?
Yeah.
Okay. Any other questions? This retrospect a little bit on this versus Agile. What do you guys think about this as a process versus Agile as a process? First, I'll ask questions. How do you think it's the same? How is it the same as Agile?
Post-its.
Well,
Say again?
The usage of Post-its.
Post-its? Yeah, okay. You're right. I mean, Scrum boards are, when I talked about build to think, Scrum boards are just a great build to think tool. It allows you to, it basically builds the process into the board with the things, and you can move through the process really, really fast because it was well designed to allow you to think. Yeah, I like it.
so
Yeah.
I think Agile has the user as the starting point, therefore the user story, and this also has the user
Yeah.
as a starting point.
Yeah.
Right? And it's circular.
Yes. And it's repetitive, and customer feedback loops, and rapid prototyping. These are all, I mean, principle-wise, these are all the same principles.
You're emphasizing interactions and spontaneity as opposed to, the method and strict processes.
Yes.
And
Yeah.
in kind of an abstract way, inspiration is almost like a planning session, ideation is kind of like the development cycle, and action is almost like the retrospective that leads back into the inspiration cycle.
Yeah.
So it has the same flow.
The same kind of flow, it is. Very good. Now, let's concentrate on the marketing part. How's it different? There's more waste here. You enable waste here. Sometimes you want to have a big wasted set of ideas, and you're only going to keep 3.
Well, like you were saying, you should come up with 500 ideas in 5 minutes.
Yeah.
But I feel like with agile processes, it's more like you have a defined bucket already.
Yeah.
In a way, right? I mean,
Agile's going to try to convince you to, it's not as good or bad, but it's going to try to convince you to narrow the set of things you can execute on to something that you can do right now, and reduce the amount of artifacts and artificial things that you're doing to try to get there to streamline the flow. And this sometimes says, okay, for now, for a little bit of time, I'm going to relax that constraint. I'm going to go as broad as I can so I can learn more, right? And I'm still going to bring it back. And before I transition to the next step, I'm going to bring it back. But for a little while, I'm going to be really wasteful, right? I'll give a great example of this. The guys at IDEO were working on, I think it was with Kaiser, but they're one of the big hospitals, on how to improve the emergency room. And they go, you know what, we want to get inspired, and we're going to go watch NASCAR. What? Yeah, we're going to go watch NASCAR because I want to go sit in that pit, and I want to understand what they're doing to fix that car in 5 seconds. Is what they do. Right? And the car comes in, they change the tires, they change the gas, they change the windshield wiper, and the car's out. And now imagine that was a patient emergency room. Wow, I think I can learn some stuff. So I did. Now, is all that valuable? No, but man, there's a couple nuggets inside that several hours of time they spend, or days of time they spent. There's travel, and there's the tickets, and building the relationship with the NASCAR guys, so you can go sit in the pit and all this stuff. Huge amount of wasted time to get to 1 or 2 nuggets, but those nuggets were really valuable. How did they forecast the things that were going to go wrong and have all the right tools and parts in order and labeled and everything so you could just go. How did they do that? And can I translate that? And that nugget was worthwhile. So Agile doesn't give you that ability to kind of go really broad and figure stuff out and come back. And that's the difference. And so there's times when this is useful, and there's times when Agile's useful. I'm not saying either's right or wrong, but think about, are there times when I need to go broad and maybe I'm not using the right process?
I feel like yin yang, like they are two sides of one big thing. I mean, this is ideation, and what you were talking about as agile is execution.
Yes. And for almost every single project I ran Agile for this process. This process was Agile. Right? This process here was unique, but this process here, especially when I'm trying to come up with the experiments, was lean startup. That's what worked best. Minimum viable product is the best method for this. So I think that these things all interact. I agree. Yin and yang, they all interact, and they're just tools that we have that we apply for the different situation. And you ask yourself, am I in a situation where I know what I need to do and I need to be efficient and lean and go now? Okay, Agile, let's go. So I'm not quite sure what I need to do. I'm not quite sure where it's at. Okay, maybe design thinking. I don't know the customer. I don't know what products are in this market. Okay, lean startup. Right? And so need to pick based upon the problem set that I'm faced with. And I think that everything matures into looking like Agile. I think they all mature into that. But I think when they start, sometimes you need something a little different. So, but that's my opinion. Don't quote me on it.
Were you saying that about Lean Startup too, because it was so close?
Lean Startup.
So when I read it, I felt similarly like.
Lean Startup is Lean Startup it has a lot of similar things here, and their method for coming up with, once I have an idea, so I'm finished the ideation phase, I have an idea, and going from idea into execution is the best method ever, because it's designed to minimize minimal valuable product. It's time to minimize the effort necessary to prove value to customers. That's the whole design. And if you just use that logic, you'll end up getting really short iteration cycles with very simple products to really, in very specific hypotheses that you're testing to understand if this is the right product to go to market. Now the guy that knows this, there's this guy we should get him here, Alberto Savoia, who used to work for Google, and he does this class and he calls pretotyping. He doesn't like to call things prototyping because engineers have a bad understanding of prototyping. They always do it way late in the system and bad. So he calls it pretotyping. And he gives examples. He's like, let's imagine I'm McDonald's, and I'm going to try to test spaghetti inside Santa Barbara. And I want to make mixed spaghetti. If the traditional model would be, okay, fine, 50 stores, figure out how to make mixed spaghetti, package it, ship it to the 50 stores, train all the staff, have them all do it. That's the traditional McDonald's model, right? He would go to a McDonald's here up the street, and he'd put mixed spaghetti on the menu and not have any. And he'd stand at the register, and he'd say who orders it, and he'd change the price and see what price point would be effective. And he would record the demographics. Is it men? Is it women? Is it young? Is it older? And he'd have a whole kind of market research in a day that told him exactly how valuable mixed spaghetti is and how well it would be received inside this market without producing anything. Right?
A link that goes nowhere.
Yeah. And so that's a great example of like minimum viable product. And what's the minimum viable product of spaghetti? It's not spaghetti. It's just a menu. It's, that's it.
Yeah, but there is a limitation because as a fad, it has become like a religion for many people. They think about the lean startup.
Yeah.
And the thing is that it narrows you. Focus always on the feedback of the customer that you want to develop a product that will for sure work before you even put $10 building something. If possible, you just pretend that you have it and you con them into paying for it.
Yeah.
That's the idea. And,
I agree.
But it's incremental and it's narrowing always.
Yes.
It will never allow you to create a new field because sometimes the genius resides in discovering what is it that the customer needs or wants, and he doesn't know that he wants it or needs it. So you're never going to get that feedback.
That's really good. I'm going to agree with you. Look at Uber. Uber didn't start off with a simple minimum viable product and trying to test into the market. Uber started because someone said, wow, if I look at this whole business landscape, I think I can disrupt the whole taxi. They basically modeled the business, and they said, wow, there's a disruptible space there. iPhone did the same thing with the App Store. If you go back in time, the AT&T, Sprint, Verizon, the carriers, they owned from the phone, the software to use the end user, and there was no space for any software provider to come inside there and change it. And Apple says, crap, if I like put this walled garden right here and made it possible for other people to develop apps into that space, I can completely disrupt this whole market. Well, they did. And now the market's completely different. We probably don't even remember what it was like before, but it used to be you got a mobile phone and you got their mill tool. You couldn't download your own. You got their, and if you were a software developer trying to make software for that stuff, you got marginalized down to nothing from the carriers because they wouldn't give you any money. And so now the market's completely different. I could be a 10-year-old kid writing an app for a video game, Flapping Duck, and make millions of dollars because Apple completely disrupted the market because they didn't do this test into the environment. They looked at the business and figured out where the disruption case was. And so I'll agree with you, it's not magic. You can't, minimum viable product when you start up isn't always the answer.
There's something to be said sometimes for a vision.
A vision and a strategy.
Somebody is like total maverick.
Yeah. Agreed. And I do a little four-square, so I'm going to test this with you guys real quick. But marketing guys quite often do this four-square where they talk about existing customers, existing products, new products. Okay? And a marketing guy will say, if I'm going to go for this square, I need a different process than this square. But I'll hit to you guys that the development methodology that you use depends upon which of these markets you're going for, right? If you want to just use your existing customers, existing products, Lean Six Sigma is probably the best. It forces you to narrow your costs and just optimize your processes at the lowest possible cost, best possible quality output. And it really does a good job of maximizing the value to your existing customers for your existing product. It's great. I'll also argue that Agile is really good when you know the customer set. If you don't know the customer, you can't use Agile because you can't test. Okay? So Agiles work really good when you know the customer, existing customer. But I'll argue that Agile doesn't work very good for new customers or new customer, new product. Okay? I'll argue that Lean Startup works very, very well when you know new product, new customer, but it's really poor choice for existing customer, existing product because it's way overkill. Okay? I'll also argue that design thinking is a more narrow space that's more up here for new customers. It's really good when you don't know the customer and you want to try to understand their needs. And what tends to happen is as you understand the customer, you fall down below and Agile works. Right? So I'll argue that. That's one of my theories, but I'm not going to like ask for any money for that idea because it's just my theory. So, okay. That's all I had. What do you guys think? Is it good? Is it worth your time?
Thank you everyone for coming tonight. Thank you again, John, for spending your time with us to share your experience. Please take just a few moments to fill out your feedback form before you leave. We do use them to help improve our future meetups. And be back here in this exact room on September 21st for our next meetup. And if you're interested in getting more involved, find myself or Heidi or Rahul, or feel free to contact us through meetup.com. Thanks.
Thank you.